Okay, so this is a video that I've wanted to make for a while, but I've hesitated for a couple of reasons. Mostly because I don't necessarily think that for most people, acne is a bad thing. Um, a lot of people have acne, and I don't want people to feel like, it's the worst thing in the world and it's something that you have to feel ashamed of and feel like it's something wrong with you, because a lot of people go through acne. But for some people it does go beyond, just the physical thing. Some of it's painful and it's bad, and it really does have a negative impact on your life. And even if it is just kind of an appearance sort of thing, for some people that can have a pretty drastic impact on your mental health and things like that, because it is, your face is like the first thing people see about you. So this is really just for people who are, just curious about Accutane and what it's like to take Accutane, but don't feel like because you have acne that it's this really terrible, negative thing about yourself. Because for a lot of people it is just cosmetic. Going through puberty and having acne is just like a natural part of life. So I just wanted to preface it with that. And I've been seeing more people kind of like putting themselves out on social media, showing their faces with breakouts. And I think that is like a good thing to normalize the fact that this is a normal part of life. But for me, taking Accutane at a young age kind of took any of that worry away from me, because Accutane did work for me and it did clear my skin, and I haven't had any issues with acne for like 2 decades at this point. So if you are someone that it is really affecting you and you're considering going through treatment with Accutane, I can just tell you my experience here. So I guess basically I started getting acne in middle school, like a lot of people did. And at that time, like in the 90s, early 2000s, it didn't seem like that big a deal to me. Like I wasn't getting really made fun of about it or anything like that, just because so many people had it. We were all kind of going through this at the same time. Like everybody had acne. So like it just seemed like a normal thing. But what I was finding with myself was I would get a little bit like hyper, not in the sense I didn't feel like really that ashamed about it. It was something, oh my gosh, sorry. It was something that I would think about at school, and I would think about like, oh my gosh, I've had a breakout, or people are going to be looking at this. But I don't think it was the extent to how much some people do think about it. One thing that I was finding myself doing was I would go in and look in the mirror and start to like pick at my face. And it's kind of like once it would start, I would just get kind of like hyper focused on it and like picking at every little thing on my face. And that was something that my mom had done too. Like my mom would spend hours in the bathroom just like kind of picking at her face. And I could see myself starting to do that. And when it started to get bad enough, when my acne started to get bad enough, my mom had actually been on Accutane. And so it had helped her. And so she thought, let's see if the dermatologist, recommends that. And from my experience and from what a lot of other people have talked about, Accutane doesn't seem to be like the first thing that dermatologists will jump to. It seems to be like they'll try all these other things first before they go to Accutane. And I don't know, I personally don't know anyone that like the creams and the antibiotics and all of that have really like worked for them as a sustainable solution. So they did try to start me on some antibiotics, and I found that was kind of like upsetting my stomach, and so I didn't want to take the antibiotics. And I also had a friend that would do that, the same thing. Like he said his stomach was so upset and it was painful, and you know, it just, the antibiotics were terrible for him and me. So I don't know how many people have had that experience with antibiotics, but it hasn't worked for me and a lot of other people. And then the creams they would give me, it was like drying out my face, and it was, you know, kind of like painful, and I wasn't getting a good reaction from the creams and all that stuff. So after trying a couple of different things, you know, my mom kind of pushed for it because she had taken it and she knew the results that she could get from it. So I think probably the reason that I was able to get on it so quickly was because my mom, you know, kind of like was advocating for it whenever she would take me into the dermatologist. And let's see, so I think I was probably around 16 when I did my first round. And you know, they kind of like scare you about it, like and I think at the time, especially for women, I think they're very hesitant to prescribe it because there are, like, basically if you're taking it and you get pregnant, I don't know what they would do if you got pregnant, but your child is likely going to have birth defects. So that was one thing as a female taking Accutane, that there was a lot of things that information that they gave me about it. And it was actually like the worst part of the process for me of taking Accutane was having to go through everything every month in terms of the pregnancy aspect of it. So basically once I'm prescribed it by the dermatologist, in order to even get my prescription, I would need to go get a pregnancy test. And so the way it worked in where I did it was the dermatologist was in a hospital, and I would go down to this other part of the hospital, and they would take my blood and do a pregnancy test. And after a few hours, they would let me know that that was all good for me to go pick up my prescription. And there was all this paperwork where you had to sign like every month of like, you had to promise to use at least 2 forms of birth control. So one of those could be abstinence and one of those could be condoms. So you didn't technically have to get on any sort of birth control. And I don't know how it is today, but this is how it was back then. And so, you know, mine was abstinence. I wasn't active at the time. So I'm like, there's no way I'm going to get pregnant. And then, so you had to like sign all this paperwork saying you would use, you know, 2 forms of birth control, you know, you wouldn't get pregnant. And then they would give you the test every month, and then you would have to go and you could get your prescription filled. I think they even make you watch like a series of videos that's like, and you had to take like a quiz. Like it was this whole thing just to get the prescription. But once I got it, you know, they talk about several side effects, and my side effects were not that bad really. So you're gonna have dry skin. Like basically, the way that the medicine works is it kind of like reduces your oil production. I don't know if it shrinks your oil glands. I don't actually know like the exact process of how it works, but basically you're not gonna have oil production in your skin. And I had really oily skin before, and that was also a thing. Like I think it's more common to have like shiny skin these days, but back in the day it was like everybody was just like, oily skin was like a bad thing. I remember carrying this little thing where you could take these little things out and blot your skin to like get the oil off of it, or girls would use powder to try to make their skin look dry. So I was a little bit self-conscious about having oily skin, I guess, but that doesn't seem to be as much the case anymore. But I did have very oily skin, oily hair. If I didn't wash my hair for a day, you know, it was noticeable. So that was, you know, really one of the first things was, you know, you don't have your own kind of oil production. So you would definitely need to have some sort of lotion to put on, you know, to moisturize after you take it. So that just kind of was something that I built into my everyday routine. Like whenever I got out of the shower, I would just like lotion my whole body and lotion my face. And yeah, and also because you didn't have like that oil protecting your skin, you had to be careful going out in the sun. You had to make sure to wear sunscreen and make sure you don't get sunburnt. So ideally it would be good to start it maybe in the fall or winter, where it's going to be a little bit colder and you're not planning to be out in the sun as much, because the treatment does take, you know, usually several months to get through. I think my first one was like 6 months, if I remember right. But yeah, so that was really the main thing for me, was just dealing with dry skin. And you know, you are probably going to have some really, really dry skin at the beginning, and you may have like your skin, you know, you'll have that self-consciousness of like, oh my God, my skin is so dry, and it's flaking. But I mean, you may have self-consciousness about that for like a few weeks, but then just know that like once the treatment's over, more than likely you're not going to have problems with that, and you're not going to have acne anymore, in most cases. So yeah, like there's all these, a lot of side effects that some people have. It affects people differently. My sister was on it, and she was having issues with like her eyes being really dry, and so she had to get some eye drops. But I think that's probably the main side effect that most people are going to deal with. There is some talk about it affecting your mental health, but from what I understand, like some of that's been a little bit disproven. There's some theories that it affects the mental health because, you know, you are dealing with the dry skin. And I think after like a couple of weeks, you will get like a really bad breakout, just because I don't know why everything's getting pushed out of your skin. So you may have like a really pretty bad breakout initially, but then it will just kind of clear up after that. One thing that I loved when I was on it was I didn't have oily hair. Like I said, I would have to wash my hair every day, you know, to feel comfortable going out in public. I could have gone 3-4 days without washing my hair and it still looked fine, because I wasn't having like oily hair. And I didn't notice like peeling on my scalp. Maybe that could happen, I don't know. But I loved the fact that my hair wasn't oily. And like once I was towards, you know, got over that initial kind of like adjustment time, my skin was starting to get just so clear, like clear to the point that, like, you know how almost everyone has these little pores, you know, or at least you can see your pores in your face. Like I didn't have anything. My face was just like so clear and just so, you know, just beautiful. So that was kind of like while I was on it. Then after I got off of it, you know, my oil production did start to come back, obviously. Like I've got some oily skin going on right now, but I don't know if I should admit this, but I haven't washed my face in 3 days at this point. So this is me, without even like washing my face, no makeup. I don't have anything on my face. And so this is 3 days, and yeah, my skin is oily, but I kind of like the oily look on my skin now. But yeah, so for me, it was not a bad process. At some point, you know, maybe, I want to say it was maybe 3 or 4 years later, I was in college at this point, I started to get some breakouts again. I started to get some acne, and to be honest, the second round that I did, I don't think I actually needed it, but I was just so used to having clear skin that when I did start to get more breakouts, I felt like I wanted to take care of it. And I honestly think part of the reason I was getting breakouts was because I was working as a server, and it was a restaurant where we would serve like fajitas, and I think the oil and everything of being around like the fajitas popping at my face and all of that, I think that was probably part of why I was getting more breakouts again. But anyway, the dermatologist like approved me going on a second round of it. And the first time I had taken it, it was the actual like brand Accutane, because it was still, I guess, under their patent to where you couldn't make generics. The second time it was the generics, and it was a lower dose. And so I didn't really have any side effects the second time. I still did like my lotion routine and everything, but I didn't notice my skin even getting that dry. And since that second round, and the second round I think was only about 3 months, that was maybe 2006, I believe. So, I mean, it's been like 15 years at this point, and I have not had any issues with my skin since then. So, yeah, I guess what I'm getting at here is if you are having like consistent issues with your skin and it's really bothering you, I would really like inquire with a dermatologist about getting Accutane, and just seeing like if you can bypass all the antibiotics and all that stuff and see if you can get on it. Like, I don't know. I feel like it's the only thing that's really worked. And from what I'm seeing, I kind of looked at some videos and things online before making this. And I mean, it does seem like really the only really long-term solution. The one biggest drawback I would say would be the cost of it. So here's what I would say about that. I was very, very, very fortunate that my mom had good insurance, and at the time that was covered under insurance, because a lot of people can have acne to the point that it's very painful and it can, disrupt their health in that way. And so her insurance was good, and so it was covered on the insurance, the first round. The second round, I did have to pay for it, and it was more, I can't remember how much it was, but I want to say it was like $900 a month. So it was pretty expensive. But here's where I would say, weigh the pros and cons of it. So there's the cost of what are you spending currently in terms of, washes and creams and different things. Think about like you're going to be using that over decades. How much is that going to cost you over a long period of time? And then there's also, the value of the anxiety and the stress and the insecurity that you have. Like if you could put a value on that, what is that? And if you do have like any sort of, expendable income that's going towards things, I know that these times is hard. A lot of people are just struggling to get by on their necessities, but if you do have like some expendable income for things, and makeup as well. Like, I don't feel the need to wear makeup or very minimal makeup. I know a lot of people wear a lot of makeup to try to cover up some of their acne. So, I mean, put in the cost of what you would be spending on makeup and things like that, and just see if it makes sense to do it. For me, I would say it was worth it to not have to even think about my skin. Literally, I don't think about my skin. Is not anything that I consider like when going out in public. I don't have to worry about, answering the door and not having makeup on, or having someone see me, with a breakout or something like that. So I feel like that's valuable to me, the amount of time that I save, not, because before I was on it, I was spending time in the morning, putting on foundation and all this stuff to try to cover it up. And now I don't even mess with makeup. And yeah, like a part of me was thinking like, well, maybe I would have just grown out of it. It's something that a lot of people go through in high school and everything. But my sister, she didn't get on Accutane in high school, and even now in our 30s, she's still kind of dealing with acne, and she did get on it for a short time, but it was weird. It was during the pandemic and everything, and it was hard to get appointments to get the prescriptions, and she was having issues with her eyes being dry, and at that time it was hard to get to a doctor. They were doing all virtual visits, and so she kind of gave up on it. But the fact that like she didn't grow out of it makes me think that like it's possible that I would have been, you know, kind of dealing with it, you know, my whole life. And so for me, it's personally been worth it. And so, yeah, I would say, you know, I know every person's different, but if it's something that's really, really having an impact on your life and you're thinking about trying Accutane, I would personally recommend it. So I just wanted to put this out there, kind of talk about my experience, you know, from 20 years later, how I feel about it and how it's affected my life. And I would say it's definitely been worth it because my skin is not something that I've had to think about as an adult. So anyway, hopefully this is helpful for someone who's considering taking it. And yeah, that's my experience.